Their suburban life was simple but fulfilling. Claire worked part-time as an events coordinator, which allowed her to balance her career with managing their household. Ryan admired her ability to handle everything with grace, from planning Ellie's birthday parties to supporting his demanding career. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, cracks had begun to form. Ryan just didn't know it yet. The unease begins. It started with small things: a distracted look from Claire during dinner, a vague excuse about staying late at work, and an unusual attachment to her phone. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Ryan casually asked, "Everything okay? You've seemed a little preoccupied lately." Claire smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course. Just a lot going on at work. You know how it is." Ryan nodded, but her response didn't ease his growing unease. The incident. A week later, Ryan's unease turned into suspicion. Claire had mentioned attending a work retreat, a standard part of her job. She left on a Friday morning, promising to return by Sunday evening. On Saturday afternoon, Ryan received an unexpected call from one of Claire's co-workers, Laura, who was also a friend of the family. "Hey, Ryan," Laura said hesitantly. "I thought I'd check in. Claire isn't at the retreat this weekend, is she?" Ryan frowned. "She said she was." "Why?" There was a long pause before Laura replied, "I was just surprised she didn't come. Most of the team is here." After hanging up, Ryan felt a knot form in his stomach. He tried calling Claire, but her phone went straight to voicemail. The betrayal revealed. Claire returned home on Sunday evening, carrying a cheerful demeanor that Ryan immediately recognized as forced. "How was the retreat?" Ryan asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "It was fine," Claire replied, avoiding his gaze as she set her bag down. "Funny," Ryan said, crossing his arms. "Because Laura called me. She said you didn't go." Claire froze, her back to him. Slowly, she turned around, her face pale. "Ryan, I can explain," she stammered. "Then explain," he demanded, his voice low but shaking with anger. Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she whispered, "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." Ryan felt his heart drop. "What didn't you mean to happen, Claire? Say it." I slept with someone," she confessed, her voice barely audible. The room seemed to spin as Ryan tried to process her words. "Who? When?" "It was someone I met at work," Claire admitted, sobbing. "It happened on Friday night. I wasn't thinking, I was drunk, and it just happened." The psychological toll. Ryan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room, replaying Claire's confession in his mind. The betrayal cut deeper than he could have imagined, not just because of the act itself but because of the lies that had followed. By morning, Ryan felt like a shell of himself. He went through the motions of dropping Ellie off at school, but his mind was elsewhere. At work, his co-workers noticed his distracted demeanor. His supervisor, Greg, pulled him aside. "Everything okay, Ryan?" Greg asked, concern in his voice. Ryan shook his head. "Not really. Just personal stuff." Greg patted his shoulder. "Take the time you need. You're one of the best on this team, but everyone has limits." Seeking help. The weight of the betrayal became unbearable, pushing Ryan to seek professional help. He found a therapist, Dr. Jenna Carter, who specialized in relationship trauma. During his first session, Ryan poured out his story, his voice trembling with anger and grief. "She says it was a mistake, but how do I believe that? How do I trust anything she says now?" Dr. Carter listened patiently before responding. "What you're feeling is normal, Ryan. Betrayal can shatter our sense of stability and trust. The first step is to focus on your own healing before making any decisions about the future." The isolation grows. At home, the tension between Ryan and Claire was palpable. They barely spoke, and when they did, their conversations were clipped and distant. "I'm sorry, Ryan," Claire said one evening, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to make this right." Ryan stared at her, his expression cold. "I don't think you can." Their once loving relationship had devolved into a strained cohabitation, with Ellie caught in the middle. The turning point. After weeks of therapy, Ryan began to feel a sense of clarity. While the pain of Claire's betrayal still consumed him, he realized that he couldn't let it define him. During a session with Dr. Carter, he said, "I don't want to live like this anymore, angry, bitter, and stuck." Dr. Carter nodded. "What would moving forward look like for you?" Ryan thought for a moment before replying, "It would mean finding a way to take control of my life again." The seeds of revenge. As Ryan began to rebuild himself emotionally, a new idea took root in his mind: Claire needed to face the consequences of her actions. He didn't want to lash out recklessly, but he wanted her to understand the depth of the pain she had caused. "I'm not talking about revenge to hurt her physically," Ryan explained to Dr. Carter during one session. "But I want her to feel the emotional weight of what she's done." "Is that wrong?" Dr. Carter hesitated. "It's not uncommon to feel that way, but I'd encourage you to focus on what you need for your own growth. Revenge often complicates healing." But Ryan couldn't shake the thought. The rift widens. Ryan's thoughts consumed him. At work, he was barely present, mechanically completing tasks while his mind replayed Claire's confession and the lies that had unraveled his trust. At home, their interactions were limited to awkward exchanges about Ellie's needs. Claire tried to bridge the gap, but her attempts only deepened Ryan's resentment. "Ryan, we need to talk about this," Claire said one evening as he sat silently at the dinner table. "There's nothing left to talk about," Ryan replied without looking up. "How can we fix this if you won't let me in?" she pleaded. Ryan finally met her eyes, his expression cold. "You didn't let me in when you made your mistake. You don't get to ask that now." A confidant appears. One night after a particularly tense argument with Claire, Ryan went to a nearby bar to clear his head. He nursed a drink in the corner when a familiar face approached, Daniel, a coworker he occasionally chatted with on site. "You look like you've been hit by a truck," Daniel said, sitting across from him uninvited. Ryan sighed. "Rough night. Rough everything." After a few drinks, Ryan found himself opening up about the betrayal. Daniel listened intently, nodding in understanding. "I've been there, man," Daniel said. "Different circumstances, but the same betrayal. You want my advice? Don't let it destroy you. Find a way to take back your power." Ryan stared at him, the words echoing in his mind. "Take back my power," he muttered. A glimpse of vulnerability. Ellie, oblivious to the turmoil between her parents, became a source of comfort and a painful reminder of what was at stake. One evening, as Ryan tucked her into bed, she looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mommy mad at each other?" Ryan froze, his heart breaking. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" "You don't laugh with her anymore," Ellie said softly. "I miss when we were happy." Ryan forced a smile and kissed her forehead. "I'll always love you, Ellie. Don't forget that." As he left her room, the weight of her words settled on him. The plan takes shape. Ryan began to channel his anger into action. If Claire had taken something from him, he would ensure she felt the sting of loss, too. He wasn't interested in violence or rash decisions. His revenge would be calculated and precise. Step 1: Gathering evidence. Ryan started documenting everything. He reviewed phone records, messages, and bank statements, piecing together the extent of Claire's betrayal. Step 2: Protecting Ellie. Ryan met with a lawyer to discuss his options for custody, ensuring that Ellie's well-being would remain his top priority if their marriage ended. Step 3. The reveal. Ryan planned to confront Claire in a way that would force her to confront the consequences of her actions, publicly. Claire's desperation. As Ryan grew colder and more distant, Claire's guilt consumed her. She tried to make amends, offering to attend therapy with him and swearing that she had cut all ties with the man from her affair. One evening, she approached Ryan while he was reviewing paperwork at the kitchen table. "I've been looking into counseling," Claire said hesitantly. "I think it could help us." Ryan didn't look up. "Counseling won't change what you did." "It could help us move forward," Claire insisted. Ryan finally met her gaze. "You want to move forward? Then admit to everyone what you did." Claire paled, her voice trembling. "Ryan, please don't do this. We can handle this privately." "Privately?" Ryan said, his voice rising. "You handled it privately when you lied to me. Now it's time for the truth." A turning point. As Ryan's plan took shape, he confided in Daniel about what he intended to do. "You're sure about this?" Daniel asked over drinks one evening. "Why shouldn't she face the consequences?" Ryan replied, his jaw tightening. "She didn't think twice about what this would do to me." Daniel leaned back, studying him. "Just be careful, man. Revenge has a way of biting back if you're not prepared for the fallout." Ryan dismissed the warning, too focused on his plan to consider the potential consequences. The confrontation. The moment arrived during a dinner party Claire had organized with friends and family, hoping to restore a sense of normalcy. Ryan had agreed to attend, though Claire noticed his quiet intensity throughout the evening. As the group sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, Ryan stood up, clearing his throat. "I'd like to say something," he began, his tone calm but laced with tension. Claire froze, her eyes widening as she realized what was coming. "Claire and I have been going through a rough patch," Ryan said, addressing the group. "And I think it's time everyone knows why." He pulled out printed messages and photos he had gathered, laying them on the table for everyone to see. "She cheated on me," Ryan said bluntly, his voice trembling with anger. "With a man she met through work. While I was at home taking care of Ellie and keeping this family together." The room fell silent as Claire burst into tears. "Ryan, please," she whispered. "You did this, Claire," Ryan said coldly. "Not me." The fallout. The aftermath of Ryan's public confrontation was swift and brutal. Claire sat frozen at the dinner table, tears streaming down her face as friends and family stared in stunned silence. Some exchanged uneasy glances, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Ryan, don't you think this should have been handled privately?" Claire's mother, Margaret, asked tentatively, breaking the tension. Ryan's gaze was cold as he replied, "Was Claire's betrayal private? Did she care about privacy when she lied to me and risked our family?" Claire finally found her voice, though it trembled. "I never meant for this to happen. I made a mistake, and I've been trying to fix it." "Mistake?" Ryan interrupted, his voice rising. "Mistakes are accidental. What you did was deliberate." Unable to face the judgment in the room, Claire fled upstairs, sobbing. The party quickly disbanded as guests made their excuses, leaving Ryan alone in the living room with the remnants of his dramatic reveal. Claire's isolation. In the days following the dinner party, Claire's social world began to crumble. Friends who had once admired her warmth and charm now kept their distance, unsure how to reconcile the betrayal with the person they thought they knew. At work, whispers followed her through the office. Her co-workers, who had always been supportive, were now guarded and distant. Even her boss, a woman who had mentored her for years, called her in for a private meeting. "Claire, I've noticed a change in your focus lately," her boss said carefully. "If there's something going on in your personal life, I hope you'll take steps to address it." We need you at your best. Claire nodded silently, knowing her reputation was hanging by a thread. Ryan's emotional struggles. Despite the satisfaction of exposing Claire's betrayal, Ryan found little comfort in the aftermath. The anger that had fueled him for weeks began to give way to an overwhelming sense of emptiness. One night, after putting Ellie to bed, Ryan sat alone in the living room, staring at the evidence he had used to confront Claire. The messages, the photos, all of it felt like a reminder of how far their marriage had fallen. When he met with Dr. Carter for his next therapy session, he finally admitted, "I thought revenge would make me feel better. But now I just feel lost." Dr. Carter nodded. It's common to feel that way. Revenge often provides temporary relief, but it doesn't address the underlying pain. What do you think you need to heal? I don't know, Ryan said honestly. But I can't keep living like this. Claire's attempt to rebuild. Desperate to salvage what remained of her life, Claire began attending therapy sessions of her own. In her first session, she struggled to articulate the reasons behind her actions. I don't even recognize myself, she admitted to the therapist, a kind but firm woman named Dr. Hayes. I've hurt the people I love most, and I don't know how to come back from that. Dr. Hayes leaned forward. Acknowledging the pain you've caused is a start. But to move forward, you'll need to examine why you made those choices in the first place. Claire also attempted to reach out to Ryan, leaving him voicemails and messages that went unanswered. Ryan, I know I've hurt you, one message began. But please don't shut me out completely. I want to make things right, even if it takes the rest of my life. Ellie's growing awareness. Ellie, who had been shielded from the worst of the conflict, began to pick up on the tension between her parents. One afternoon, she asked Ryan directly, "Why doesn't Mommy smile anymore?" Ryan's heart sank. "Mommy and I are going through something hard right now, but we both love you very much. That will never change." Later that evening, Ryan overheard Ellie talking to Claire during her bedtime routine. "Are you mad at Daddy?" Ellie asked innocently. Claire's voice broke as she replied, "No, sweetheart. I'm mad at myself." A twist in the plan. As Ryan continued to focus on healing, an unexpected development threw a wrench into his plans. Daniel, his co-worker and confidant, approached him at work with a concerned look. "Ryan, I don't know how to say this, but I ran into Claire's co-worker, Laura, at a bar. She mentioned something that didn't sit right with me." "What is it?" Ryan asked, his stomach tightening. "Laura said that Claire told her the affair was complicated," Daniel said cautiously. "She claimed the guy was manipulative and took advantage of her vulnerability." "I thought you'd want to know." Ryan's anger flared. "Manipulative? She never said anything like that to me." "Maybe it's worth digging into," Daniel suggested. "For your own peace of mind. Investigating the truth." Unable to ignore the possibility that there was more to the story, Ryan began digging deeper into Claire's relationship with the man she had cheated with. He reached out to Laura under the guise of wanting clarity for Ellie's sake. "Claire never told me much about what happened," Ryan said during their conversation. "Do you think she was being honest with you?" Laura hesitated before replying, "Honestly, I don't know. She mentioned feeling pressured by him at times, but I didn't pry. I thought it was just her way of rationalizing what happened." The conversation left Ryan with more questions than answers. A darker truth emerges. The possibility that Claire's affair might not have been as straightforward as he believed gnawed at Ryan. He couldn't ignore what Daniel and Laura had said, so he decided to confront Claire directly. One evening, after Ellie had gone to bed, Ryan found Claire in the kitchen, washing dishes in silence. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm. Claire turned, her expression wary. "What about?" "About him," Ryan replied, his tone heavy with implication. "I heard something. Laura said you felt pressured." Was that true? Claire froze, her hands gripping the edge of the sink. For a moment, Ryan thought she wouldn't answer, but then she whispered, it wasn't as simple as I made it seem. Ryan's chest tightened. What does that mean? Claire sank into a chair, her shoulders slumped. At first, it was innocent, just friendly conversations at work. But then he started, saying things. Compliments that felt too personal, texts at odd hours. I should have shut it down, but I didn't. And one night, after a work event, he offered to drive me home. I was drunk, and I didn't stop him when he made a move. Ryan stared at her, his emotions a tangled mix of anger, confusion, and something he couldn't yet name. You're telling me he pushed you into it? Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. I don't want to make excuses. I let it happen. But it wasn't what I wanted, Ryan. It never was. Conflicted emotions. Ryan spent the next few days grappling with Claire's revelation. While part of him wanted to dismiss it as another attempt to deflect blame, another part couldn't shake the possibility that she had been manipulated. During his next therapy session, Ryan shared what he had learned with Dr. Carter. How do I even process this, he asked, his voice filled with frustration. She still betrayed me, but now I'm questioning everything. Dr. Carter leaned forward. It's natural to feel conflicted when new information challenges your understanding of the situation. The question is, what do you want to do with this knowledge? Does it change how you see the path forward? Ryan didn't have an answer, but the session left him with much to consider. Digging deeper. Determined to uncover the full truth, Ryan reached out to Derek, the man Claire had been involved with. He found Derek's contact information through a mutual connection and sent him a terse message. We need to talk. You know who I am and what this is about. I'd prefer to keep this civil. Derek's response came quickly, fine. Name the time and place. They met at a coffee shop, the tension palpable as they sat across from each other. Let's get one thing straight, Ryan began, his voice cold. I'm not here to hear excuses. I just want the truth. Did you pressure my wife into anything? Derek scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Pressure? She was a willing participant, man. If she's telling you otherwise, she's just trying to save face. Ryan's jaw tightened. She said you took advantage of her when she was drunk. Derek shrugged. She didn't say no. The cavalier response sent a surge of anger through Ryan, but he forced himself to stay composed. That's all I needed to hear, he said, standing abruptly. Enjoy your coffee. A decision to protect. The encounter with Derek solidified Ryan's resolve. While Claire's betrayal still hurt, it was clear that Derek had exploited the situation for his own gain. Ryan decided to shift his focus from revenge against Claire to ensuring that Derek faced consequences for his actions. He began compiling evidence of Derek's behavior, reaching out to others who had worked with him. To Ryan's surprise, several women came forward with similar stories of unwanted advances and inappropriate behavior. One former coworker, Lisa, shared her experience in detail. He was charming at first, but it turned into something darker. I reported him to HR, but nothing ever came of it. Ryan encouraged her to file a formal complaint, offering to support her testimony with what he had learned. The fallout for Derek. Within weeks, Derek's company launched an internal investigation. Ryan's evidence and the testimonies from other women painted a damning picture. Derek was placed on administrative leave pending further review, and rumors of his misconduct spread quickly. When Claire learned about what Ryan had done, she was stunned. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. Ryan met her gaze, his expression hard. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not for what he did to you, or anyone else. Rebuilding boundaries. With Derek out of the picture, Ryan felt a sense of closure regarding that chapter of his life. However, his relationship with Claire remained fragile. "I'm not ready to forgive you," he told her one evening. "But I don't hate you, either. For Ellie's sake, we need to figure out how to move forward, whether that's together or apart." Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, Ryan. Even if it means letting you go." A new beginning. Months later, Ryan filed for separation, believing that time apart would help him find clarity. He continued therapy, focusing on his personal growth and strengthening his bond with Ellie. During a trip to a nearby park, Ryan met Olivia, a single mother with a son close to Ellie's age. Their connection was immediate but unhurried, built on mutual respect and understanding.